the evisceration of the relationship between creative and audience is sort of horrible. So what I spend a huge amount of my time doing at the moment is absolutely encouraging creative companies to build direct audiences.
Erica Wolfe-Murray is a business and innovation expert who's worked with hundreds of creative founders, earning a reputation as the Delia of the business world. What do you think is the best way to build an audience?
Really find a niche that nobody's paying attention to.
Erica is focused on helping founders to recognise something that most people overlook, the value already sitting inside their business.
There is so much you can do. I find it so sad when people don't know the wealth that they have in their business.
I'm Nicola Sands, and if you're building a creative business and trying to grow an audience, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Erica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Okay, well, can we start from the beginning with your journey so far and from the creative industries through to being a coach that you are today? Where did it all begin?
Wow. Well, I left school and started work while I was still 16, which feels incredibly young now, but I know there are lots of people out there doing the same. And within about 2 to 3 years, I'd sort of found myself in advertising, which I can tell you was a lot better than the insurance world that I started in originally.
So somebody in an advertising company just gave you a job?
It was my third job, and I'd sort of realised that advertising looked a lot more fun. I had a boyfriend that worked in advertising, and I went, "Oh, this is something that could be quite interesting." And within about 18 months of getting that job, I had a big international client and was sort of flying around the world on business at an age where now, I mean, most people are still at university.
That's incredible. So you were doing that at like, what, age 18, 19?
No, I was probably doing it more 20, 21. I had a huge budget, was flying around the world. I even got to fly in Concorde, which just shows you how old I am.
Wow.
But it was fantastic. But I realised I was in the account handling department, and I realised the whole way through that creatives had far more fun. I spent a lot more time on the creative floor than I ever did on the account handling floor, and decided to leave and retrain myself as a copywriter, because I didn't think that I could be an art director or anything like that, because I hadn't been to art school. But I thought I can write. So over an 18-month period, I retrained as a copywriter. And then I was given lots of freelance work by all sorts of different people, doing all sorts of different things, including, which must have been the most torturous project looking back on it, having to write the leaflet defining the zones for London Transport when they brought in the zoning system, which was just impossible, but it was really, really good practice. And then I decided I needed to get a proper job. So I went to a job agency, and I got back from some meeting or some project that I'd been on to find 2 messages on my answer phone, and one of them was for the job as a copywriter in the Conran Design Studio, and the other message was for an account handler in the Conran Design Studio. And I went, well, this is make your mind up time.
Two fantastic jobs.
2 amazing jobs, yes, because, you know, the Conran Design Studio was the place to be at the time. And so I decided to apply for the copywriting job, got it, and became their in-house copywriter for probably 2-3 years, which was fantastic.
Was that a really enjoyable experience?
It was, except in a design studio, the copywriter at the time was regarded as the lowest of the low, because you spent your whole time messing up their beautiful catalogue spreads, their packaging, their everything with your words. But of course, you know, the words are really important.
Why did you leave that job?
I left Conran's because I needed a bigger challenge. There were a huge amount of really excellent heavyweights at the top, and I was ambitious and I had no place to go, and there were several of us that felt like that. So my next role was, I was asked by one of the people who'd given me quite a lot of freelance copywriting over the years if I'd be interested in going and helping him build the business to consumer side of his graphic design studio in South London. So John brought me in and said, would you really focus on bringing in B2C clients, still keep doing your copywriting, run the projects you build in, and let's see what happens. He was doing a lot of B2B work. So I brought in NatWest, huge project from Next, Courtaulds, all sorts of people like that. And yeah, that was fun.
That's amazing. I mean, they must have been hugely impressed that you managed to do that.
Yeah, I think it was just, when you're that sort of age, you just go for broke. And, John brokered a lot of those calls. I mean, I remember when we started pitching for NatWest, I remember the head of marketing said, I really don't want to I'm not talking to any design studio that doesn't have in-house copywriting. So who have you got? And John said, well, you're sitting looking at her. And she said, well, what do you know about financial writing? And I said, well, I've written all the credit card brochures and everything like that for the whole of, the Conran owned empire. So Habitat, Heels, the Conran shop. And she went, fine, keep pitching.
Did you get nervous pitching?
No. Pitching's a bit like... It's a bit like making a speech, I think. It's showmanship, it's acting. But equally, you have to know your shit. And if you don't, then you need to do more homework before you go in.
A lot of people find it very hard, don't they?
I can completely understand that. I think it's, I've had disastrous pitches where I've gone, I think I'm just going to bail out now. And have got up and walked and just said, I don't think this is going to work for either of us. And I think that's more about not necessarily me not knowing or them not knowing what I do. I think you can just assess that the chemistry's wrong, and so there's no point in keeping going because you can't change that.
What do you think are the key elements of a really good pitch?
Research. Absolutely knowing what it is you think they want, what's going on in the market. Have they got a reasonable budget to do what they're looking to do? What can you find out about their creativity, their opportunities? Research, so much comes down to research, but also that research doesn't necessarily always sit within their business. What can you see that's happening out in the marketplace that maybe they haven't spotted? How do you see things shifting? And I think to go in with an opinion on how you see what's happening in their marketplace changing, I think is key.
Absolutely. I mean, for somebody who was so young going into advertising, going into agency work, you were very successful and very confident. Where do you think that came from?
I don't know that I was very successful. I think I was... I just think that when you are starting out so young, you just have to understand who you are and try and take that forward. And what it's been brilliant at giving me in all the different roles that I have is I've learnt that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And so you walk into every situation going, well, I know I can stand on my own 2 feet. So what can I do to make the best of this situation?
And obviously, eventually you got married and had children. So how did your working life change then?
Well, I got married while I was still at the design studio, and I started my own design studio while I was still working there, which, of course, they found me out. And I got one of those never darken your door letters. Never darken our door letters on my mat when I got back from holiday. And But at the same time as I'd sort of on the side started my own little design studio with my then husband, I started a production company, a television production company. He'd been a documentary assistant producer at the BBC, wanted to make his own documentaries. And so we started both sort of together. I did the design side and he did the documentary side. Now, remember, I have no training. So I'm not a designer, but I just absolutely fell in love with design whilst I was at Conran's. But also there was something that echoed from my childhood, which took me a long time to work out. But now I understand how that echo from my childhood has played out through my life.
And what is that?
So when I was a child, quite a small child, between about the ages of 4 and 8, a next door neighbour who wasn't there very much. They were there in their flat in a sort of ruined building next door to where I lived at weekends. And what I didn't realise was this man was someone called Milner Gray, who was one of the UK's top industrial designers and commercial artists in the 40s, 50s and early 60s. And I was in and out of that flat like a blue-arse fly. I mean, I was there. There were always pencils, there was always paper, there were all sorts of things that I didn't have at home. And I had absolutely no idea who Milner Gray was until I heard his name being mentioned while I was working at Conran's. And I said, "Oh, who's Milner Gray?" And they went, "Don't you know?" And I went, "No." So they explained the importance of this man to design in Britain. And I just went, wow, that explains when I walked into the Conran studio why I felt so at home. It explains so much. And now I look back on all those years and the things that I've done, the things that I love, and I realise it came from that 4-year period when I was a small child. And
That's incredible.
That has informed so much of how I get many of the people I work with now to review their very early childhood, because I can see how much it touched me in ways that I still can't quite explain fully. But It's been design has been a touchstone for the whole of my life. It's my safe, happy place.
It just goes to show how important those early years are.
They're fundamental. And I think what's fascinating is that so few people revisit those years between 1 and 8. Because if you think about how much of your character is formed then, and if you think about it, it just amplifies those things that you've learned and seen and done, amplify, the more years you go on. And I'll often, with everybody, I'll go back and say, look, tell me, let's start at the very beginning. And they go, what, when I started work? And I go, no, where were you born?
Gosh.
And people go, why do you need to know that? And I go, that will become clear.
There is a Jesuit principle, isn't there? Give me the boy until he's 7 and I'll give you the man.
Yes.
That obviously applies for both sexes.
Yep. I mean, it's really fascinating. And the other thing that it also allows me to do, this sort of unpicking of where someone's come from. They only share as much as they need to share. Where somebody's come from and what they've done, is it allows you to really, really understand who they are and be cheerleader in chief for them. And often as a coach, I'm afraid I'm not a trained coach. I'm a business coach rather than a sort of personal or individual coach. I'm very bossy, I'm very directional, but it allows me, because I really know who they are, I can be their cheerleader in chief, because they've shared, where they've come from, their journey. So, if they're questioning themselves, I can go back and look at the entirety of their story and go, but come on, you've done this. This is fantastic. Don't think like that. Don't criticise yourself in the same way. This is phenomenal.
Can we talk about, so you had your television production company with your husband. Did you enjoy that?
I did, but we ran the design studio and the TV business for quite some time together, so I was mostly on the design side. So I launched my own range of home furnishing and garden accessories in the mail order catalogue. I worked for a number of clients. And then after about 10 years, maybe slightly less than that, and also during this time I had 4 children, we then decided to pull me into the production company because they needed somebody to run the money. And you can run the money you can do it when you've got children, because it's mostly you're mostly doing it in spreadsheets and on laptops and things like that, rather than having to be out on shoots. Because, my husband was away on shoots, Afghanistan, all sorts of different places. So somebody had to be at home, somebody had to be base. And so I became financial director with absolutely no financial training whatsoever. But I've always said that, if you can run a busy household, you can run a business.
But you're a creative through and through. And actually, a lot of creatives don't really enjoy the financial or commercial side. So how did that sit with you?
Because if you run a business, whether you're creative or whatever you do, you cannot abrogate financial responsibility to anybody, just as you wouldn't, your household accounts. So I had to come up with ways of managing the system that I could work with. And so, for example, in those days, when you were an indie, you had to have 2 bank accounts per project. You had to have a deposit account and you had to have a current account. Well, at one point I was running 28 bank accounts, and you just go, oh my goodness, how did this happen? But it yet again, another steep learning curve. And, I may not have been the world's best financial director. I've never had to sell companies or anything like that. But boy, did I know where every penny was. And when people say to me, I don't really know where the money is, I'm afraid I have absolutely no time for that, because I say, well, you need to. And I end up, I have a spreadsheet system that I've been using to run company finances for 28 years now. And I was working on a project last week with 10 small businesses, and I went, okay, here you go, here's the spreadsheet. And I know they will all use it, because it's just one of those that helps you integrate budgets with spend in a way that no program still does.
That puts you in a very strong position as a coach, because not only have you worked on the creative side, you've also worked on the financial side, which is quite unusual, would you say?
Yes. And that's why when I set up my current business after, I left the production company in late 2011, because Malcolm and I had both gone our separate ways. I really didn't know what I was going to do, so I sat down and looked at my career long and hard and went, what can I do that nobody else can do? What do I understand that nobody else does? And part of that was the fact that I understood how creativity worked in all sorts of different creative sectors, but I also understood how the money worked in different creative sectors and where there were opportunities. And so I went, okay, what can I build out of this completely unique experience? And that has sort of really informed what I do now, and have done for the last 13 years.
And so what you do now is advising SMEs and entrepreneurs about how to grow their business. Is that right?
Yes, so I help companies and founders across the creative, cultural and tech sector to understand what their unique journey to here hides in that journey, and what intellectual assets and intellectual property they already own, what they've already got, and how they can think about those things really differently, how perhaps they can repurpose them to embed, growth and greater commercial resilience in their business.
Actually, you're one of the leading experts on intellectual property in the UK and advising SMEs.
Careful, lawyers.
I would say you are.
Lawyers would absolutely throw the book at you.
No.
Because I'm not a lawyer.
I know, but you are an expert on intellectual property. You've advised a lot of companies.
That's really kind, thank you. What I absolutely love doing is seeing what people have got, what they already own, or what they could own, but they're giving away and trying to stop them, and then going, okay, how can we take this wonderful casket of riches that you either create or have and do really fun and different, crazy shit with it, to make you commercially more resilient, to make you enjoy what you do more, to allow you to own more of what you do so you can monetize it differently. And I absolutely love doing it. I've worked with, a leading playwright. I've worked with huge, big brands. I've worked with ballet schools, theatre schools, charities, tiny little businesses, and it works for everybody. That's the crazy thing about it.
Do you think most people understand exactly what intellectual property is? Can you just clarify exactly what intellectual property is?
Okay, intellectual property, the best definition for intellectual property, it was written by the World Intellectual Property Organization. And basically it is that intellectual property is creations of the mind, or they are the laws to protect creations of the mind. So whether that's, designs or literary works or music or anything like that, when they are turned into something, and those laws are there to allow the creators to earn both money and recognition from what they have created, and that these creators should be allowed to flourish through into the intellectual property structure, which is global.
So do companies and small businesses in particular own a lot of intellectual property that they're not aware of?
Yes.
Can you give us some examples?
So your website, your social media posts, they own all their decks that they use. They own all their pitches. They own all of the designs that perhaps a client hasn't paid for. They own all of the proposals if they're in a production company that they've sent out. They own scripts. They own books. They own speeches. They own articles. They own, huge amounts. And you only have to be one or two people to do that. And they could own more if they understood how to create and manage it themselves.
And how can businesses commercialise that intellectual property to make money from it, Erica?
Well, it depends what they do. There are so many different ways that you can do it. So let's just say, if you create a game or an app, you not only own the finished game or app or whatever, but you can also use all the bits that went to create that, because you own the copyright for the bits too. And you can do such fun stuff with that. Or, for example, if you've created, here we are recording a podcast now. If you're creating something and you've had to speak to lots of experts to learn about it, well, you could interview those experts on a podcast, or you could, devise something with them, and you can own that too and do something with that as well. And, to help you, whether it's on LinkedIn or, bringing in audiences in different ways. There is so much you can do, and I find it so sad when people don't know the wealth that they have in their business.
You're very keen on adding value, aren't you, for businesses, really helping them to add value to what they do. And you talk about that in your book as well, Simple Tips, Smart Ideas, which is, it's like my Bible.
Oh, thank you.
I've read it cover to cover and made lots of notes. What made you decide to write your book?
Oh, that's such a good question. I had never thought of doing a book. And at the time, I had desk space in a studio, a photographer's studio, where there were lots of other businesses. And my daughter and I worked together at the time. So it must have been about 2016, 2017. And we had the meeting room in this space booked the whole time. We had clients coming in and everybody was like, what are you doing? You've got this room booked the whole time. Who are all these people that are coming in to see you? And one of the companies who also rented desk space there, I remember she said to me, oh, I'd love to be able to work with you, but I don't think I can afford you. I'd love to be able to bring you in to look at my PR business, but I don't think I'd be able to work with you. And she was really sad about it. And she said, have you ever thought of writing a book? And at that moment, I thought, if I don't say this, I'll never do it. So I stood up and I said publicly, I turned around to her and I said, I will write you a book. And everybody in the studio went, we're going to hold you to that. And I went, okay, I'll write you a book. And I did.
How long did it take? Because there is some work that has gone into that. You can tell when you read it just how much work has gone into it.
Well, I started in August, and rather than starting to write, what I did was I had 26 notebooks of every single meeting I'd been in over the last, 6 years or so. And I went through every single page, every single meeting, every single one of those comments. There were diagrams in there, there were thoughts. And on an A6 piece of scrap paper, I wrote out what was the key takeaway from that meeting, or what was the key point that had been raised, or all the key points that had been raised. And I finished doing those notes from those 26 notebooks, because I was also working full time as well. I finished them sort of Christmas time, and I had a stack about that high. And I then went, okay, what am I going to do now? And I thought, okay, I'm going to sort them into 5 groups, because I think it breaks down into 5 areas. And then I started writing in between Christmas and New Year. So literally just after I'd finished my stack, did my sorting. And I was approached by somebody and found myself an agent in March. And she really liked what I'd written. And I remember ringing her in about June saying, Carly, how long should a book be? And she said, probably about 35, 40,000 words. She said, how are you doing? And I went, well, I'm up to 65,000 already. And she said, could you send it to me? And I didn't realise till we spoke afterwards that she was really, really worried that because I'd never written a book before, the draft bit that she'd seen, that I'd not been able to hold the tone of voice. But because it's my tone of voice, and because it's written in tiny little chunks, because each of those A6 pieces of paper is a separate paragraph with a different title. So it's really easy to dip in and out of. There isn't a sort of big narrative arc that you follow. It's not my life journey. It's what you need to build your business. And if you want to open it this afternoon and do one thing this afternoon, and that little title appeals to you, do it. So it was written like that. So it took me, when Carly sort of said, she wanted to see whether I'd managed to maintain my tone of voice, because it was mine. It was very easy to. But also, she didn't realise I'd been a copywriter for years. So of course, when you're a copywriter, you have to just take. You're a journalist and you also do writing. You realise you have to take different tones of voices and be able to work with the tone of voice. So It was really easy for me to write.
Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the process?
I did, and I didn't. You do realise that you've got a lot to plough through, but there were times where all you wanted to do was hide in a corner and just...
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it's a very intense process, writing a book. Would you agree?
I think because mine was bite-sized chunks, no. But if you've got a story and you need to map it all out on, then I think yes. But mine was, I could sit down and write about, I could just write this bit and I could dash that off in 20 minutes.
There's one bit in your book as well, and it's something like 20 different ways that you can earn money from your intellectual property. Well, and there's different ideas. I mean, there's so many ideas. It's like my head was buzzing when I read it with so many different things.
That bit has got a bit of a funny story attached to it, because I just would note down whenever I came across different ways of making money. I'd just sort of make a note, and I can't even remember where that came from. And every client that I worked with, I go, how do they make money? And every commercial transaction, how are they making money? And there are actually over 50. And anyway, one day I was asked to go in and see a leading accountancy practice, and particularly leading in the creative industries, because they were doing something around small businesses and they wanted to meet me. So I thought, well, I'm going to use this. So I went in and we chatted, and I went, I don't think I'm going to get anything from this. And I said, tell me something. I said, when you're at accountancy school, because remember, I've not had any further education or anything like that. When you're at accountancy school, do they teach you all the different revenue models, ways that companies can earn money? And they went, why would they do that? And I went, wow. And I'll come to the second point about what that then opened up in my mind. And I went, wow. And he said, why do you ask? And I said, well, I've compiled a list over the sort of months and years of all the different ways I've come across places making money. And I just wondered if one existed anywhere else. And he went, no, could you let me have it? And I went, blow me down. They don't get this. And I've only ever come across it once since then, which is there is a business school over in Switzerland, and somebody went, your book and the list of all the revenue models? And I went, yeah. And they said, this business school has done one a bit like it. And I've ticked off everything on my list, and there were only 2 I hadn't spotted. Amazing. I talk about them very differently to how a business school does. But the other thing that meeting with that accountant made me realise was that accountants generally aren't there to facilitate the growth of a business. They're there to make sure that you are, operating according to a given set of rules. Not all accountants, but a lot of accountants, that's what their role is, to make sure that you're accounting properly to HMRC, or you're following the fiscal rules or things like that. They are not there to do all sorts of exciting things with your business necessarily. Some, of course, will, but mostly not.
Yeah. When you first start working with a business, Erica, what's the first thing you do when you start speaking to the founders and start looking at their business?
I ask them a very simple question. I ask them what their hopes and dreams are. And it's not about ambition. And I was on a call with a company this morning, the very first call, and I asked them that. And what your hopes and dreams are, they're a combination of personal and professional hopes and dreams. And I'm only looking for the next 3 to 5 years. And if you're a board of a company, each person on that board can have their own hopes and dreams. And what it effectively does is it gives us the point on the horizon that we're aiming for. And of course they can change, and they should do during the process, but it actually just begins to set out why are we here? Why are you running your business? What's it for? It's for your life, how you choose to work, what you want from the combination of home and work. It's all of those things. And what's extraordinary is how rarely people in their lives get asked that. And I've had people with tears pouring down their faces because nobody's asked them that for a long time, and there is so many things tied up in that emotionally for them.
Would you say that a lot of small business owners get stuck at a certain level? I mean, are you able to help them get past that kind of plateau that a lot of people reach?
It depends what the plateau is. I'm not saying that I'm the answer to all things at all. There are certain things I'm good at and certain things I go, ooh, I don't think that's my wheelhouse. And I'm completely honest on that. And, I would encourage them, help them find someone else to work with. I think that some people do. Other people sometimes have so many opportunities coming towards them, they don't know which one to take. And so, that can be what I help them do too.
That's an interesting point, actually, because sometimes when you're running your business, you don't want to climb the wrong mountain or give all your energy in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And you can think, which opportunity do I pursue? Which idea do I pursue?
Yeah. There's absolutely that. And then there's this word growth. And growth is such a fascinating thing because most people think of growth purely as, most people I would suspect think of growth as purely turnover and, getting bigger, more employees and everything like that. And I think that that's wrong. I think that there are so many different ways of looking at growth. So growth could be about, growth of opportunity. It could be growth of influence. It could be, growth of profit as opposed to turnover. It could be growth of IP. It can be growth in so many different ways. It doesn't just have to be turnover and just getting bigger and bigger and selling. Because for me, some of the most exciting companies that I'm working with at the moment will never be more than 5 people. They don't want to be. And yet, for example, one of them is an Emmy nominee, has, staffs up as needed for the creative work they're doing, but has got really, really exciting IP opportunities globally, but there's only 5 of them. And I absolutely love that. So overheads are relatively tight, but they're doing all sorts of interesting things in interesting spaces. And I really, really love that type of model. I think businesses treading lightly on the planet is quite an important part of what I do. And part of the reason I love working with SMEs is because you can come up with some quite dramatically new stuff and
be very agile.
Be agile, have fun, enjoy it. A lot of the organisations I'm working with, for example, will try and get grants for things and things like that. And I'll go, don't get a grant to pay for the whole of something. Get a grant to allow you to do that much so you can leverage all sorts of other opportunity in interesting and different ways. Nobody has more fun than I do because, of course, what nobody sees, Nicola, is that I work with all these amazing creative people. So I get to play with their creativity in a way that if I was just me on my own, I'd never be able to do. So, whether I'm working with, a poet, a presenter, a publishing company, all of these people, all of a sudden I'll get, or a games developer or an app developer, I'll be able to play with their creativity and push them in their creativity and learn about a different sort of creativity and what makes that creativity, what makes that thing that they're producing tick. And nobody ever realises that I'm getting more from them. No, or we're getting, it's that it is a two-way street. So I get the opportunity with their creativity in a way that, boy, did I never anticipated.
Have any of your children gone into the creative sector?
All four of them.
All four of them. That doesn't surprise me.
So I've got one that works in a design studio. I've got one that runs a documentary company with his father. I've got one that works in brand licensing and one that's a senior AI product manager.
Oh, amazing.
Which is just, I mean, funnily enough, the latter would say, no, I'm not in the creative industries, but he is.
Would you say it's an exciting time to be in our sector?
I think it's both exciting and scary. You know, obviously the big AI threat is there, and I've seen some really interesting things happening in AI. I mean, for example, one of my past clients developed the AI presenter Tilly Norwood, who's been in all the press. I've also got clients who've developed some really great training programs for creative companies in AI. But equally, I think a far greater threat, perhaps than AI, has already happened, which is the disintermediation of between creatives and audiences that has happened because of big tech. So, you know, Spotify, YouTube, people like that. Creatives see them as an opportunity, but they don't own those audiences. They simply don't. And the evisceration of the relationship between creative and audience is sort of horrible. So what I spend a huge amount of my time doing at the moment is absolutely encouraging creative companies to build direct audiences that they can then take with them in all sorts of interesting ways that can help with can help them if they want investment. They've got a direct audience, so they can prove that something works. There are amazing places like Patreon and Substack and lots of direct audience revenue models that you can build. I really, really am encouraging people to go down that route at the moment. And what's fascinating is seeing some of the companies that are building audiences in really, really different ways, because money's tight in the creative industries at the moment.
What do you think is the best way to build an audience?
Really find a niche that nobody's paying attention to and go for it. What's fantastic about niches, they can be global, and you can attract an audience. Use YouTube, use Instagram or whatever to attract an audience and then encourage that audience to come with you to a paying platform where you can have direct communication with them. Now, you're only perhaps going to get a small percentage of that big audience that you can draw on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok or whatever. But if they're paying you direct, you can do crazy things with it. And that often can encourage a big, commission, a big company to come to you, because they can see that you with your small business has already found a niche, has already found an audience that's prepared to work with you, that's prepared to pay you, and that is of interest to them. So all of a sudden you might have a commission, you might be asked to do something differently for them.
It's quite democratizing in a way as well, isn't it? Compared to how it's been in the past.
Yes.
That kind of thing was very gate-kept.
Yes, I mean, but YouTube and Instagram, places like that, are effectively gate-kept because you can't download that audience to you in the same way. You can get access to it. But, this is why I have a job, because that's what I love doing, is saying, how do we find, how do you find, keep, allow yourself to continue this great creative journey that you're on, but talking to people sort of one-to-one.
Interesting. What are your ambitions for the future, Erica?
Oh.
Are you going to slow down?
No.
You've got an awful lot on stuff.
No, I'm going to keep on doing this till I die. What's fascinating for me is you become, as a working individual, and this goes for everybody, not just, for you or me, you become increasingly valuable as you get older. And anybody that says different, I disagree with. You've got bigger lists of past clients. You have a life journey that is totally unique to you. And what matters to me more than anything is, as people grow older, if they don't want to stop, is they really think about harnessing it. Going back to intellectual assets, your life journey is, nobody in the history of the human race will ever live this again. And so by harnessing that, and by really digging into the years that you've worked and the types of clients you've worked with and things like that, you can go on doing whatever you want for years and years, and that's what I absolutely intend to do.
Absolutely. Well, success is about energy and passion. It's not about age, is it? So we've put the link to your book in the description, but where else can people find you, Erica, if they want to get in touch?
Well, the only place that you can actually get my book is from me and my website. It is on Amazon, but it comes to me anyway, so because I do all the dispatch of my book. But it's on my website, which is lola-media.co.uk.
Lola Media, that's your business, isn't
Lola
it?
Media
Lola
is my
Media. Why did you call it Lola?
Oh, that's a funny story. So when it was still a sort of very, very nascent business, So what was happening was, I was working for the production company. I was financial director. And I thought, this whole world of intellectual assets and IP, how all these organisations have got so much IP, yada, yada, yada. This is going to be a great business. And I remember presenting it to the board of the production company, and I just realised that my days at the production company were coming to an end. And as these words came out talking about this new idea I'd got, I wished I could sort of swallow them and that the people in the room didn't hear them, because I realised that this was what I wanted to do. And so I started developing it as my own business. And I just thought, well, I'll give it a working title. And the working title was Lola. I think, because I liked how the word looked graphically, back to my design, back to typography and, how things look. I love the word, the way you sound when you say it. It's such a lovely, sensuous word. It's translatable in lots of languages. But the other thing was, there's that great Kinks song where there's that line in it saying, she walked like a woman, she talked like a man, in that song Lola. And I knew to create this offer, I had to be really, really tough. I needed to walk in like a woman but talk like a man, because nobody understood. When I launched Lola, nobody understood what it was. So I sort of went, okay, that's why the working title's going to be Lola. Then when I had to come and register the company, I went, what am I going to call it? And I kept on trying to come up with new names. And I couldn't find anything that I liked more than Lola. So I just went, okay, we're going to go with Lola. It was
meant to be.
It's meant to be. What is utterly hilarious is so many of my clients' children are called Lola. So in the days of when you had printed stationery, I used to end up, how on the cover page of the printed stationery, you had the sort of address and registration and VAT number and things like that. But on the continuation sheet, you just generally had the logo, which was Lola. So I used to ship off pages of stationery. My clients would say, "Oh, my daughter's called Lola. Could we have some of your stationery?" So I used to dish off tons of stationery with Lola on it, because I just thought, well, that's an easy little gift, isn't it?
It could be an extra revenue model. Erica, it's been absolutely brilliant speaking to you.
Lovely
and thank you so much for being such an inspiration. You've really helped me and my business. You've been coaching us as well. So thank you so much, and we'll do it again soon.
Lovely. Well, best of luck with everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Success Means Business is brought to you by Applehead Media.